Okay, so I had a few questions around how I created this, and it was all done in Photoshop fairly easily. Relatively speaking, you can edit video in Photoshop, at least to a simple extent, and creating this double exposure kind of effect is actually relatively straightforward. So let's dive into how to do that. Okay, for this one, I think I want to experiment a little bit with this colored image. May or may not convert to black and white like I did on the other one, but we'll see. So the first thing that you want to do with something like this is actually create a good layer mask. So I'm going to use the quick select tool and zoom out a little bit so I can see better, but just come in here and quickly go over the areas that I want to keep. If you hold down the Alt key, you can back out because sometimes it jumps like that beyond the areas that you want to select. We'll clean up the hair in just a second with the select and mask, but I think that covers everything pretty good. So up here, select and mask, you come in with this first tool and you can just kind of paint the hair edges back in. And depending on your image, it may or may not work really well. The contrast here is pretty good, so it picks it up pretty good. And then just hit OK. And depending on your settings, it may have... So we have our layer mask. Next thing you want to do is create a new file, new working document, and you want to use a film and video preset. For web stuff, 1280 by 720 is fine, so we'll go with that. And then we want to pull that layer in. So if you just undock that by pulling the tab down, make sure your layer with the mask is selected, move tool, and if you hold down the shift key when you drag it over here, it will center it automatically. Then obviously it's a little bigger than what we need, so if you hold down the Alt key when you transform, it will it'll scale it around that center point so that everything stays nicely centered in that frame. And you can see the little cleanup on the hair here isn't exact, but I'm not really super concerned with that. You can come in, if you hold the Alt key and click on the mask, you can see what that mask looks like, and this is one of the few times I actually will use the built-in burn tool. I'll come in here and just deepen down some of the dark areas of this to kind of clean that mask up a little bit, so it's not quite so so crazy on the edges there. And I'm going to clean up the edge of the ball a little bit just by hand using a paintbrush. With the way this effect works, it doesn't have to be as perfect as a regular composite image that you might do. Alright, so I think that's pretty good. Now, we want to pull in our video file, which if you don't have any video, like a time-lapse type video works really well for this, and I've pulled a few of these off of Pixabay, which is like kind of my favorite go-to site for stock photos and whatnot. So this is a cloud time-lapse that just, this is what it'll look like. So we're going to composite that in, and what you want to start with on this is to put that same layer mask on the cloud image. So if you push down the Alt key and then click on the mask and drag it up, you can see you kind of have this preview of that mask. And if you drag it up to that cloud layer, it will copy that mask onto the clouds. Okay, so now we've got that. And we want to start adjusting this on the video timeline. So we'll go up to window. So we'll go up to window and open up the timeline. And you want to make sure this says create video timeline. If it doesn't, this little drop down arrow will get that. Click so it says create video timeline. Click that and it will bring this up. Now there's a controls for the video right here, so if you just play that, this is what we've got right now, which is pretty cool in and of itself, but it's just the outline of our subject there. And then you want to come in and just edit that mask with the paintbrush. I'm going to use black at about 10% opacity. And just start bringing back details where you think they look the best. Obviously for this one I want the face. I'll bring back just I don't want all of the sphere, because I want it to look like there's clouds shining through there, but I do want some of her hands. So we'll kind of just touch some of that, a little bit of the hair along this edge. All right. So it's just a little bit of tweaking that mask until you get the look and feel that you want from it. All right. So to create the repeating video effect in the background, what we actually have to do is create a loop out of this video, but we're not going to do that in this window here. As a smart object, we want to open that in its own separate window to edit. So if you double click on the icon, it will bring it up in its own document. Now keep in mind on this, we're at 5 seconds on the timeline for this, which is a good amount of time for this kind of thing. So we want to make this a 5-second loop. To do that, we want to double click on the time stamp down here, and it brings up a window for you to set that. And now this goes in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So you want this to be 5:00, and that will set your marker at 5 seconds. So go ahead and actually, what do we want to do? You want to so you want to look at this footage and see where you like the cloud looping. So I like the amount of clouds that we have up here in the beginning through about, where are we here? 6.5, maybe 7 seconds worth. So we can go ahead and just drag all this down. And then what you're going to want to do to set the loop effect is, if you right click on this, when you bring this in, you can see it's in a video group, and we don't want that because it'll start adding extra video clips to the end of this rather than stacking them on top of each other. So if you right click on this group section and click ungroup layers, it will now just be a single individual layer. Then you want to duplicate it, so Control J, Command J on a Mac, and you can see it sets the beginning at your timestamp, so you just want to reset that, and then drag this edge down to about the same time. Then come in here in the middle and make sure you just have this upper layer selected and click the scissor key, and that will split it. And then you want to basically, you can click one at a time, swap them around so that what was in the middle is now the last frame and first frame of this video animation. So you can see right now there's a pretty sharp transition right there. And to clean that up, what you want to do is come to this little split box here, which is your transitions. And you just use the upper fade and drag and drop that onto the end of this clip and the beginning of this clip. So that will create a smooth transition between those layers. So with this transition, you can see it fades nicely, but it's a little bit unrealistic because you get this big cloud coming in where there's not much of anything there. You can move this around until it kind of blends together a little bit smoother. So it may still, it's probably not going to look perfect at any given point, but if you can pick a point where it's at least got some clouds in there and then blending together smooth, more naturally, it'll look a lot better in the finished edit. And you want to do that with both these. Now, depending on the video clip that you pick, you may not have any of these issues, but the other part of this we want to make sure that you do is to set the time on this at the same amount of time as your clip that you're editing here in the original document. So to do that, you know, we're at the end here, we're at 5 seconds. You can see it on the timestamp down here. So you want to come into this document, double click on that timestamp, and it brings up the window where you can edit that. Now, this time shows in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, so individual frames per second. So we want to set that at 5:00. So that will move your marker to 5 seconds. I'm going to then move this one, so its end point is at 5 seconds. I'm going to move this one to the same point. So now, if you play this right here on the control, or you can use the space bar, it should loop pretty seamlessly and look like a really nice smooth animation. Especially with the effect that we're going to be doing. Actually, you know what? I might just go ahead and loop this over and see how that fade transition looks. Yeah, that's not quite as... I like it better the other way, so we'll leave it like that. Once you have this set up and looking the way you want, you just want to save that. So Control S, Command S on a Mac, and then that edit will now be in your original document. And the preview on this is a little slow and pixelated. You can see this small blue line up here just above your top layer. That's Photoshop rendering each individual frame as this time plays. And I still have this overall frame set to the original thing, so this little handle up here will let you drag that down to the end point. And it looks like I've got an extra frame in here. Oh well. You want to make sure those are the same length, because then you'll, if they're not, you'll get a weird glitch at the stop point of your video. All right, so we'll try that again. See, so once it goes through and renders everything else, it'll play at full speed again and give you a good look at how this is going to work. And I think that's pretty awesome. Now, the fun thing with this is now that you've got that set up, you can edit and add things to all these layers just like you would in a regular Photoshop document. So one of the things that I did here was to add a solid color black layer. And then I'm going to bring down a copy of the video. So hold down the Alt key or Option key on a Mac and click and drag that layer down here underneath your image layer, and that creates a duplicate down here. So you've got your video that you just created, your still photo image with the mask, and then a duplicate of the video. Now we're going to delete the layer mask on that, and then do some edits to desaturate and blur this image out of this video. So we want to go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. I'm going to bring that down almost completely. I do want to leave a little bit just because that's, and this is totally up to you on how you want this to look. The other alternative to that is doing a black and white adjustment to it. So Image, Adjustments, Black and White. This is kind of cool because you can then adjust the level of, like the blues for instance in the sky, make those darker. So I think I actually like that better than desaturation on this particular shot. So we'll go with that. Then we want to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and this is still set from the last when I already went through this, so that's about where I like it, 13.9. Okay, and now as you go through this, need to move this back in line with everything else because my marker was here and it set that new layer at the point that I was at. So now you can see there's this nice blurred dark effect over here, but I also think I want to brighten it up on this side over here. So above this background video, I'm going to create a new layer, move that back over here. I keep having to adjust this because apparently I made this, I don't know. Somehow I've got an extra frame in there and that's kind of annoying. I want to brighten up this upper area here. So I'm going to pick a light yellow color and just brush that in. I might need to desaturate that a little bit. And you can move that around. I might actually decide to move that up higher. I'm going to switch that to a linear dodge and go ahead and drag it up to the very top. And then kind of reduce the opacity. Yeah, I'm not sure I want that much yellow to it, so I'm going to hit some white on it. I like that better. Okay. So now you can see there's a more of a glow up there than just having an empty thing. Now you can also do a number of other things like we've done in a lot of the compositing. So if you switch off the transparency shapes layer, it makes it this intense glow. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that or not, but you play with the opacity on it and different things and see how you like the effect. And the fun thing about this part is it starts to interact with the clouds as they move through. With the linear dodge blend mode, it will flare more on the white clouds versus the blue, darker sky area. But again, I'm not sure that I care for that look so much, so I'm going to turn that checkbox back on just to make it a little softer. But I will create another layer above that, and what I want to do here is actually just come in with a soft brush and kind of paint in the highlight on her cheek, maybe a little on the forehead and some here, and in here on the little crystal ball as well. And I'm going to go ahead and set this one to the linear dodge and check that transparency mark and see how this looks. So I like the intensity of the flare on here. I think on her cheek it's a little bit much, so I'm going to just pause that, go to the eraser, and at 10% I'm just going to dial that back a little bit. I still want it there, but just not as intense. Yeah, so that's looking really good. And maybe come in here on the eyes and just hit those with a little more intensity there. That last bit on the nose was too much. There. All right. So there we have pretty much the overall effect of what I wanted to create. And again, you can add other layers and blend modes and play with that until you get the look and feel that you want. Once you're happy with this, there are two best ways of rendering this image out. If you want to create an MP4 file, which is what will post best to Instagram and probably like a banner image on Facebook, you go to render video. What? That's new. That's annoying. So once you're in here, you can name the image, select it. You want to go ahead and use the Adobe Media Encoder format. 264 is great. You can reset your pixel sizes. So for instance, most of the web kind of stuff, I would probably just go with 720 by 405 on this. And pretty much everything else will work as is. And you click render, and it will export that video out. Yeah, it will render that video out somewhere, somehow, slowly. Right there. All right, so a standard MP4 won't default loop on your computer system, but the other version, if you do an animated GIF, you want to come up here to File, Export, and use this Save for Web Legacy. And it'll take a little while for this to process, so you got to give it a few minutes to get all this together. And the fun and annoying thing about this part is every time you change something here, it will do this again. But it's not too bad. It just takes a little bit of time. Essentially what it's doing is generating the preview of the GIF, so it's having to render everything into a GIF format. But up here in this, you want to have this drop down set to GIF, perceptual diffusion 128. I want to go with 256 colors to get the maximum depth of color that you can in a GIF. Make sure down here on the bottom looping options it says forever. And then again, we're going to set our width to 720. In here, it will link it to say 405, and then you can save that out as well. Maybe. All right. So now, like so. Pretty cool. So there you have it. That's the process for creating a looped double exposure effect cinemagraph, if that's what you want to call it. Have fun with it and good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.